And what ends up happening is in the busyness of life, a lot of times what we do, we kind of forget about the most important thing that we need in our life. And so many times we forget about that source of life. And that is when we really need to sit down and talk to God in prayer. Because what happens is there are certain things in life that happen by accident. You get up in the morning and you didn't mean to stumble over a door seal or something and fall. You have an accident. But there are some things in life that have to be intentional. It's not by accident. And one of those things that has to be intentional in your life is prayer. Prayer isn't by accident. You can't just, oh, well, I'm just going to talk to you right now, God. No. I just talked to God, and I didn't know I was doing that. That was totally by accident. I didn't plan this. I didn't mean to do this. It's intentional in our whole life, the things that we're going to do and the things that we're going to share. And so when we started talking 3 weeks ago, in the first week, we started talking about temptation. And when you look at your life, there are so many temptations in this whole life. It just seems like we're bombarded with it constantly. I was watching the news this morning, and they were doing a recap of some things that have recently been going on. One was a 15-year-old boy on a bus beating a 9-year-old little girl on that bus. And then they were talking about, just Friday, a young man, 14 years of age, stabbing one of his classmates to death in school. And then they were talking about a little girl. I believe she was 12 or 14, can't remember. She was on the bus, just minding her own business. And a boy started beating on her. And as most kids today have cameras, they all started videotaping this. And of course, they put it out on social media. So everybody now knows this little girl has been beaten up. Well, guess what they started doing? They started bullying her and making fun of her. This little girl, 12 to 14 years of age, committed suicide because she couldn't handle the pressure. We get upset, we get mad, we get irritated, we say, God, where are you? Why do you allow these things to happen? And God's saying, you don't understand. I'm still in control. But it's not me that's allowing this to happen, you are. I told you all along, if you would come to me. We use the verse in 1 Chronicles 7:14. If my people, which are called by my name, would humble themselves and pray and seek my face and turn from their wicked ways and call on me, he said, I would turn my face back around and I would heal their land and their nation. America needs a healing more than ever before. We were a land that God blessed. Why? Because we prayed. We were taught to pray. Children we're taught to pray. When I went to school, we prayed in school. It was as much as saying the Pledge of Allegiance every day. Families had values, and you knew what the family stood for. And so what's happened is we become so busy. We started talking about the temptation of Christ. And so many times we forget that the things we're going through, he went through. He lived at a time when the Roman government was in control of everything. You were a Christian, you were persecuted. If you talked about God, they didn't want you talking about God. The things that Jesus did, even in the church, the synagogue, they didn't like him because he was telling the people the truth and taking the power away from the church. And they still wanted to control the people, and Jesus wanted to let the people go free. We saw the temptations that were there. And then last week, we talked about humility. Because Jesus, it said, didn't think so much of himself that he came and gave up his position in heaven to come to this earth so that we could have life. And sometimes we forget. And I hear people all the time, as we were saying, well, the things that I'm going through, they were easy for Jesus to accomplish. But go back and look at his life, and we've talked about this. He didn't use his supernatural powers to get through day-to-day circumstances. You know what he did? He prayed. He prayed. We're going to talk about that today, about how he prayed. Because sometimes God tells us to be still. And it's really awkward for us to be still, right? So I'm going to show you how awkward it is. So what I'm going to ask you to do is I'm going to ask you to stand up where you're at right now, if you can. I just need you to stand up. And I need you to close your eyes. And we're going to put a countdown on for 1 minute. And what I'm going to ask you to do is to be totally silent. Don't look at your watch, don't look at anything, and don't be counting. But whenever you think that the minute is up, sit down. Okay, you got it for me? Ready? Go. Your minute's up. They started it late. Some of you did very well. Some of you, your minutes are lasting longer. That's cool. That means your 24-hour day has just now been stretched. But do you see how hard it is sometimes just to be still? To not focus. You see, because this morning we're going to talk about a term called contemplation. Big term, big word. We'll give you what it means in just a minute as we begin to start talking about Jesus and how he handled some things. You see, because a lot of times what happens to us is our life gets loud and busy. We're being constantly bombarded with things. You start out in the morning and you've got your calendar of things that you're going to do that day. Now, some of you, that calendar is totally empty. But by the end of the day, you look back and you think, what did I do today? Because it just seemed like everybody was just pulling at you from one direction after another after another. If you were at work, my wife, she's always, at the end of the day, she always talks to me and she says, well, I got through January the 10th's emails, and we're already through February. And now she's on January the 17th. And she says, and she was talking to them, she said, listen, you're asking me to do all of these things, but let me share something with you. I've got this report that you're asking me to do every day. And can I tell you how long it takes to do that report? She says it takes a full 7 hours. Okay, she stretched her day. No, but it does. It takes a full 8 hours to do this. Sometimes there's 120,000 records that have bounced out. And somebody has to go in and enter amounts for all of these things, else the jobs that they're doing are not going to be costed correctly, right? Some things, maybe the rate of exchange is wrong and this has happened or that has happened because it's a multinational corporation. And they have to have different exchanges to the dollar. And so it's 8 hours. Plus, she's got all these other duties, right? And that's how our lives are. If you're a mother with a child, or two, or three, or not a mother, but a wife with a husband, that's kind of sometimes the same thing as a child, just a little bit more attention needs to be given to the husband than the child. But everything seems to bombard us and take us away from what it is that we need. And our life becomes so busy and so hectic that sometimes we realize, I just want some peace and quiet. I just want some silence. And just to enjoy that peace. In Mark chapter 1, verse number 35, gives us probably the best there is. Very early in the morning, while it was still dark, he, talking about Jesus, he got up, went out, and made his way to a deserted place. And there he was all alone. no disciples, no family, just him and God. Maybe some of the sounds of nature. The sun's not up yet. The world's not alive. With the sounds. But Jesus, this wasn't just a one-time deal. This was constant. Because Jesus, this was his pattern, would get up early in the morning before anybody else and would steal away and talk to the Father. Now, I can tell you something that I think is absolutely correct. I don't think that Jesus, before he left, I don't think he took out a piece of paper and a pen or a pencil and started writing down everything he wanted to talk to the Father about. I don't think he said, well, I need to know, okay, Father, where am I going today? Okay. This is our plans for today, Father, that we're going to go over here to this city. And by the way, I know that there's somebody over there that needs healed. And so, Father, what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask you to heal them. And by the way, there's somebody else over here that we met about 3 weeks ago, and I'm going to go over there and I'm going to check up on them too. He didn't have a shopping list. Saying, by the way, I've got a crowd with me and they don't have any food for today. And so, Father, here's my market list. You know, by the way, when we get into town, I'm going to send Peter and John over here to Kroger or Myers or Aldi's. And can you have somebody there to pay for it for them? You know, Lord, God, this is what I want. I don't think that Jesus went to God with a shopping list in the morning. But a lot of times what happens, we get so caught up with, here's all the things I need to pray for this morning. Here's all the things I need to pray. And can I tell y'all something? Something really fantastic? God says he knows your every thought even before you pray. So what do? We are so proud that we spend 30 minutes praying in the morning before our day starts. And I covered everything on my list. I checked it off. See how good my prayer life is? And ask him, hold on a minute. Let me ask you about your journal. What did you write down about what did God say to you? Oh, well, that's blank. Well, why is that part blank? I didn't have time. I allocated 30 minutes to praying, and it took me 30 minutes to go down my list. And then I'm done. You know, I'm hoping that God's going to speak to me the rest of the day, but you know, get started. You don't understand, Pastor. It takes me an hour and a half to get ready for work. And I got to have my coffee. I got to watch Days of My Life rerun or whatever that was, or my Netflix thing, you know, I got to watch that, and then I got to get to work, and so I'm running late. You know, that's just the way it is. No, it ain't. Now we wonder why we're all messed up. Because in our contemplation, that stillness, we're thinking about, have I covered my list? When God already knows what's on your list, what he wants to do is to tell you, hey, item number 3, I'd like to talk to you about 5 minutes about that. Because you're really putting a lot of thought into this, and this isn't what I'm going to talk about. I'd like to skip down to number 12 on your list, and I'd like to share some time with you about that item. Or, by the way, I would really like to talk to you about something that's not on your list. Because you don't know that today you're going to meet somebody over here that's really going through a rough time. And they need somebody, just you, with your story, to be able to tell them that it's going to be okay. He's got it. It's going to be all right. He's got it. But we get so wrapped up in what we want to do. Richard Foster wrote a book back in 1992. It was called Prayer, Finding the Heart's True Home. And I got a couple of things out of his book that I'd like to share with you. He said this. He said, when we pray, or genuinely pray, the real condition of our heart is revealed. This is as it should be. This is when God truly begins to work with us. The adventure is just beginning. Every morning, every day, we begin a new adventure. When we allow God to know our heart. Can I tell you something? It's okay to tell God you're upset. It's okay to tell God, I don't think this is fair. Go ahead. Tell him. Get it out. Because then you may realize that what you don't think is fair really was okay. My wife and I were sharing somebody's post about someone who was very, very sick. And they had been praying for him. I think it was a father or mother. And the father died. And they said, but we had so many prayers. Prayers for him to be well and to be healed. And I said, he was. Or no, I'm sorry. It was a 10-year-old little girl. That's what it was. It was a 10-year-old little girl. And the 10-year-old little girl had cancer, leukemia. And she died. And they were saying, it's not fair, it's not fair, it's not fair. The grandmother, I think it was saying, why couldn't it have been me? I've already lived my life. She hadn't shared hers. And I thought, not fair. Hold on a minute. That 10-year-old doesn't have to go through the garbage of this world. How awesome is that? She gets to go from here straight to the presence of God, while we have to still stay here and deal with this stuff and get upset and get mad. And they say it's not fair. Hey, you and I don't know God's plans for everything. We only know a little smidget of it, a little look into the window. And what we don't know is what was maybe out there later on. We don't know the stuff. God is fair because he knows what's going to happen later on in the ways that only he can. Richard Foster goes on to say this: I urge you, carry an ongoing conversation with God about the daily stuff of life. Not just pray in the morning and stop. That's why he says pray without ceasing. All day long you should be in constant conversation with God. Now, I know some people's going to think you're weird, walking around talking to someone that's not there. But can I tell you something? They may not be able to see him, but honey, you can sure feel him and know that he's there. And it's okay, because, can I share this with you? God is not imaginary, friend. He is real. Very real. I may not see him, but I can sure see the effects of him. I see the wind as it blows. I see the birds as they fly. I see the clouds as they move. I see the rain as it descends, or the sun that comes up, or the moon that comes up. I see the effects of God, and I know that he's there. He is not imaginary. He is real. And when he says, for now, don't worry about proper praying. Just talk to God. I hear people say all the time, well, how do I address him? Hey, God. Don't call him bub. Okay? Or don't call him, hey dude. Okay? Give him some respect. But Father, he says, just talk to him. Share your hurts. Share your sorrows. Share your joys freely and openly, he says. He says, God listens in compassion and love, just like we do when our children come to us. He delights in our presence. And when we do this, we will discover something of inestimable value. We will discover that by praying, we learn to pray. I hear people all the time, I don't know how to pray. Just start praying. You'll catch on. You'll get the hang of it. My kids did not come out of the womb saying, hey, Dad, I'm here. You know? Or, hey, Dad, I like this. Or, hey, Dad, I like that. My kids didn't. They had to learn sounds and how to put those sounds together to make words. And then they started putting those words together to make thoughts and sentences. They didn't learn all of that in the beginning. They learned that a little step at a time. And that's the same way with our prayer life, ladies and gentlemen. It doesn't come naturally. And the first time you go to pray, it may be 30 seconds, and you thought you've been praying to God for 5 minutes. And then all of a sudden, you got the hang of it. Your prayer life is really clicking. And you get in there and you're talking to God, and the next thing you know, it's 3 hours later. Where did the time go? This has been the best 3 hours of my life. It's been the most profitable. I have learned so much in these 3 hours of just shutting up and listening to God. He is awesome. He has got some great, great ideas. So how do I do this? In Psalms chapter 121, verses 1 and 2, here's what you need to do. I lift my eyes toward the mountain. He says, where will my help come from? My help comes from the Lord, the maker of heaven and earth. You know what happens a lot of times? Here's how we pray. We get down on our knees, we fold our hands, and we bow our heads. What do I see? Nothing, because I got my eyes closed. I see absolutely nothing. And guess what happens? Most of the time when my eyes are closed and I'm looking to the floor or wherever I'm at, and I'm looking, most of the time my mind starts wandering. Did you ever see the paintings of Jesus praying? You never seen the painting of Jesus praying in the garden? Father, Father. I lift up my eyes. Why? Because this way my sight is limited to what I could see. This way my sight is limitless. Now, I'm just talking about actual looking to the floor and looking to the sky. But in reality, what he's talking about is looking to the sky. When we look to God, we're not confined with all of this guilt and everything else. We're looking and we're finding out that his grace and his love is just abounding. Because he's looking down to see us. It's a conversation back and forth. But most of the time, what is great about this conversation is when I shut up and I listen to him. He already knows my thoughts. Now, that doesn't mean you shouldn't talk to him. Yes, you should talk to him. But the most important part of the prayer isn't what you're saying. The most important part of the prayer is what he's saying to you. So build some time into that prayer whenever you do it. I suggest first thing in the morning. Okay? Even before my feet hit the floor. Hey, God, I'm awake. Let's talk. How's it going? You know, he's after me. How's it going? I'm tired. You know, what we got scheduled for today, Lord? What do I need to rearrange? What are these things? Because when we begin to look up, it changes our perspective. Do you notice that every time you look up, you find something new? Did you ever realize that? How many times have you even been around your house or you've gone someplace and you've been there thousands of times? And all of a sudden you look up one day, where did that come from? My neighbor's just built a house. No, that house has been there since 1800. We just haven't looked up or looked around. And he's saying, hold on, lift your head up. Lift it up. It will change your perspective. And so, what we need to do, I have to tell you, when the pandemic hit in 2020, it was late 2019 and everything started happening. You know, we're starting to catch wind of what's going on over in China and in Europe and all of this stuff, and they keep telling us, oh, it's headed our way, and then it gets here and they're shutting everything down, and it was like, God, what are we going to do? You know? What are we going to do? And it was like, how do we handle all of these things? We shut down church for, a week or so. We and nobody was here. We did it live from here, so everybody else could see it. There was like 5 or 6 of us here that kind of did it. We broadcast it so everybody else would stay connected, I did that for a couple of weeks and said, no, this ain't going to work. And so I was looking for an FM transmitter, the kind that you have in the drive-in theaters, so that people could come just to the parking lot in their cars, just to be able to see each other, even though they didn't get out of their cars. And it's like, it's just not the same. You see everybody, but you don't see everybody. I'm a type of person, I need to see faces. You know? And see that. And I keep thinking, Lord, are we ever going to get back together? And it's like, God, how much longer is this going to last? You've got to keep a good face. You got to wear a mask and not really show your true feelings of how you really feel about this. And you're hurting more and more inside because of life is changing. You're hearing people who are getting it. You know, we were here that Easter, I think it was. Were we still in the parking lot? Okay, was then. So then we've gone about a year into this. And so we were here for sunrise service. And then Mark and I were upstairs. And we were putting some things together, I believe. And you were here for sunrise service, were you not? And that's when you got sick. And he got sick and said, I don't think I can stay. And I got to go home. And then we're sick the rest of the week. And then finally, I think on Thursday or Friday, finally went to the hospital and found out he had COVID. Real bad. Hurting his lungs. And so he was gone for what, a month? 6 weeks. And it's like, okay, God, how much did we learn of the stuff that Mark did upstairs that we carried on because we were doing live service? We're doing everybody's back. And you start seeing people hurting. We've seen some people die that had COVID because they had breathing problems and other things. You've seen elderly people die. And it's just hurting and hurting and hurting. And God, how much more do we have to endure this? And then all of a sudden you have to look up and say, God, I know you're in control. And I know you got this. So let's see you work. And he does. In ways that we've never, ever seen before. In Psalms 121, further down, in verses number 7 and 8, it says, verse 1 and 2 says, look up, and where does my strength come from? It comes from the Lord. Here's what verses 7 and 8 says. The Lord will protect you from all harm. All harm. Not part of it, all of it. He will protect your life. The Lord will protect your coming and your going, both now and forever. We get so bombarded with everything going on around about us when we forget who's our protection. Our protection is not the government. We've already seen that. They told us, take the vaccine and you won't get COVID. Lie. Okay? Wear a mask and you won't transmit it. Lie number 2. Well, you took the vaccine, now you need a booster. And not only do you need a booster, if you got COVID, you won't get it again. 3 strikes and you're out. I ain't believing another word you're saying. Because number 1, you can't protect me from it. But he can, with or without a vaccine. And if I got it once, he can protect me from getting it again. If he wants. If he doesn't, we'll be okay. But not only will he protect my life, he will protect your coming and going. Every step of the way, every day, he is protecting me. He's watching over me. If something happens, he's got it. He's got it. And so I just got to wait for him. So, if you're stressed, your life is really, your blood pressure, you're on the worst meds in the world, and it still ain't going anywhere. It's just shooting. And you're saying, it's got to be that way because you don't understand. I got a stressful job. I got a stressful life. Everything else in my life is just stressful. It's stressful. It's stressful. It's stressful. Take a walk. Just take a walk. And can I tell you something amazing? You can actually pray and walk at the same time. I know everybody tells me, Pastor, you don't understand. I cannot walk and chew gum. Who cares? Who really cares if you can walk and chew gum at the same time? Okay? That, if you can't, awesome feat. But the most awesome feat that you can ever do is walk and pray while you're walking. This is why I say, keep your eyes up. You don't want to walk and pray with your eyes closed. That may get you into trouble. You may get hurt. And God says it's okay to walk and pray with your eyes open. Okay? He's not going to have a little mark over there that says on February the 12th, that pastor told you to walk and pray, and you did, and you ran, and you were walking and praying, and you had your head, and you had your eyes closed, and you ran into a building, or tree, or your car, or somebody else that hit you. You weren't listening to the pastor who said you could keep your eyes open when you pray. Okay? I told him to say that, so you need to listen to me. Okay? Can I also tell you something? How many of you go by a calendar on your phone? You schedule things out? How many of you all have doctor's appointments? When was the last time you got up in the morning and said, I need to go see the doctor today, and try to get an appointment? Sometimes it's a month out, if you're lucky. Sometimes they'll tell you, sorry, but we're not taking new patients. Can I tell you something awesome? I can get up in the morning and put 9 o'clock, I need to talk to God. And can I tell you something? He'll show up. He won't tell me, I'm sorry, but I'm busy at that time. Okay? Yeah, he might call me back and say, we need to reschedule this thing. Because I got some more pressing stuff going on right now. But can I tell you what you really, but honestly, can I tell you what would really be neat? And these are some things that I find I used to do, and I've kind of gotten away from some of this stuff, and I'm finding I need to go back and do some things different. And that is this. You ought to take and schedule a certain time of day, every day, to pray with God. I'm talking about if you go to bed at 10 o'clock at night, can I give you a hint? If you're going to go to bed, my phone, I do this purposefully, okay? I go to bed, I've got mine set for 10:45, okay? Or 10:30. At 9:45, my phone shuts down. It goes into a sleep mode. If you text me at 9:45 at night, I'm not getting it. I have to deliberately go in and get it. "9:45 is time to talk. It's time to shut down and just, what do you got to say to me, Lord?" It doesn't happen all the time because it tells me it's 9:45 and I'm right in the middle of something. And sometimes I got to stop and say, hold on, no, I'll come back to this. There's something else more important. But can I tell you something? Put something on your phone. And then the other thing is, before you go to bed, stay away from this thing for at least 30 minutes or so. Especially if you're going to talk to God at that time. Because if you don't, you're going to be so concerned about who just texted me, what did they say, and everything else. And I'm not going to hear what God's saying to me because I'm too concerned about everything else. You need to do this. Why? Because you're going to find that when you practice stillness, and I'll finish with this real quick. When you practice stillness, you hear from God a lot clearer than being busy. Okay? If you don't believe me, Psalms 46:10. Now, the Holman says, stop your fighting, okay? Which is cool. Stop your fighting and know that I am God, exalted among the nations, exalted on the earth. A lot of the other translations will say, be still. Be still, which I like better than stop fighting. But stop fighting is pretty good because we're fighting among ourselves. We're fighting against Satan. He just says, be still and know that I am God. Don't be so preoccupied with everything that's going on. In Psalms chapter 62 and verse number 1, the psalmist said, I am at rest in God alone. My salvation comes from Him. I'm at rest in Him. That, may I say to you, is the most peaceful spot you will ever find in your life, is when you are at rest with Him. He is better than a sleep number, better than a beauty rest, and He's better than anything else. Because let me tell you something, He's got your sleep number. He knows the firmness of the mattress, whether it's got to be real firm or sink to let you rest. And that's what He does. 1 Kings chapter 19 verses 11 through 13. Look at this. This is Elijah was out there, and this is Elijah's encounter with the Lord. Look at what it says. Then he said, God talking to Elijah and saying, okay, God, where are you? And so God told him, he says, go out and stand on the mountain in the Lord's presence. Here's what I need you to do. Elijah, he's in a cave, he's running. And he's saying, okay, God, have you forsaken me? And he says, okay, Elijah, here's what I need you to do. I need you to get out of the cave, and I need you to go stand out there. Okay? Go stand on the mountain in the Lord's presence. So he comes out of the cave, and he's on this mountain. Look at what happens. And at the moment, the Lord passed by. A great and mighty wind was tearing at the mountain and was shattering cliffs before the Lord. But the Lord was not in the wind. After the wind, there was an earthquake. But the Lord was not in the earthquake. After the earthquake, there was a great fire. But the Lord was not in the fire. See, a lot of times what happens is we ask God, will you move in my life? And all of us, what we're looking for is something huge and dramatic to happen. God, I need this. And all of a sudden, this big thing happens in our life, and we say, oh, that must be God. God wasn't in the earthquake. God wasn't in the fire or the wind. But after the fire, there was a voice, a soft whisper. When Elijah heard it, he wrapped his face in his mantle, and he went out and he stood at the entrance of the cave. Suddenly, a voice came to him and said, what are you doing here, Elijah? What are you doing here? It wasn't the earthquake, it wasn't the fire, it wasn't the wind. It was a sweet, soft voice. That was the Lord. May I say this to you? There are times when God's trying to get your attention and you think it's a sickness in your life. You think it's you losing your job. You think it's this and you think it's that. And you say, okay, God, you got my attention. He says, I didn't do any of that stuff. That wasn't me. My Joe Biden impression. I just want to talk to you. He keeps thinking that the Lord's in that little whisper. All right. Let me give you the last verse. It's Matthew 11, 28 and 30. Matthew 11. Yeah, I was told that when I come down here, I get soft. So let me get a little louder, okay? Matthew 11, 28 to 30. Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Take up my yoke and learn from me, he says, because I am lowly and humble in heart. And you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light. We're going to do this invitation a little bit different today. Because maybe you just need to take some time right where you're at while she's playing and just in your silence, just talk to God right now. and say, God, here's what's going on in my life right now. And God, I really need to talk to you about this. Because God, I'm hurting. I'm hurting. And I know you know that. And I know you know what I'm talking about. So God, I'm just going to take a few minutes and just listen to you. God, speak to me. Speak to me like you never spoke to me before, would you please? He will. He will. So let's take a couple minutes. You pray and let him speak to you.